The bustling hallway of Westfield High School was a kaleidoscope of activity every day between classes. Students rushed past each other, lockers slammed shut, and laughter echoed off the walls. In the midst of this chaos, Avery Mitchell tried to remain invisible, clutching sketchbooks to chest while navigating the crowded corridor. Being a senior didn't make the social hierarchy any easier to bear, especially when you preferred charcoal smudges on your fingers to the latest social media trends. Avery had perfected the art of blending into backgrounds, observing rather than participating in the high school experience that everyone claimed would be the best years of your life. It wasn't that Avery disliked people, quite the opposite. There was something fascinating about watching interactions unfold, capturing expressions and body language in quick sketches hidden away in notebooks. But there was a certain safety and distance in being the observer rather than the observed. The art room had become a sanctuary, a place where being different wasn't just accepted but celebrated. Ms. Winters, the art teacher, always said that the most interesting artists were those who saw the world differently. Avery held onto those words like a lifeline. And then there was Cameron Reed. Everyone knew Cameron, star basketball player, effortlessly charming, with a smile that seemed to physically brighten any room he entered. He moved through the school with an easy confidence that Avery couldn't comprehend, high-fiving friends and chatting with teachers as if the entire world was designed for his comfort. Cameron existed in a different universe, one where popularity came naturally and people gravitated toward you instead of away. What made it all worse was that Cameron was genuinely nice. It would have been easier if he'd been arrogant or cruel, fitting the stereotype of the popular jock. But no, he volunteered at the local animal shelter, tutored underclassmen in math, and somehow managed to remember everyone's name. His kindness was as legendary as his three-point shot, and that made the growing feelings Avery harbored all the more complicated. Because in a small town like theirs, certain kinds of love still raised eyebrows and whispers. The tension between what the heart wants and what society expects can tear a person apart, especially when you're 17 and still trying to figure out who you are. The first time Avery really noticed Cameron was during junior year in AP Literature. They'd been assigned as partners for a presentation on The Great Gatsby, and Avery had been terrified. Working with Cameron meant being seen, being heard, stepping out of the carefully constructed shadows. That first study session in the library had been awkward, with Avery stumbling over words and avoiding eye contact. But Cameron had been patient, drawing out opinions and ideas with genuine interest. "You see things differently," he'd said, looking at Avery's notes with their margins filled with tiny sketches capturing the emotions of each character. "That's cool. Most people just regurgitate what the teacher says." That simple acknowledgement had cracked something open inside Avery, a dangerous hope that perhaps being seen wasn't always terrible. Their presentation had earned an A, and afterward, Cameron would smile and wave in the hallways. Just small acknowledgments, but each one felt like a spotlight in Avery's carefully shadowed existence. The loneliness that had been Avery's constant companion throughout high school sometimes felt suffocating. Sitting alone at lunch, sketching people who were laughing and sharing stories, created a peculiar kind of isolation, being physically present but emotionally separate from everyone around you. There were acquaintances, of course, other quiet students who occupied the fringes of social circles. But true connection? That remained elusive. Avery's parents, though loving, couldn't understand why their child didn't bring friends home or go to parties. "High school is about making memories," Mom would say, not realizing that some memories were better left unmade when you didn't fit the expected mold. So when Cameron bumped into Avery at the water fountain one Tuesday morning, it seemed like nothing more than an accident. The brief touch of shoulders, the splash of water, Cameron's quick "sorry about that." All perfectly ordinary. Except for the way his fingers lingered on Avery's arm while steadying them both. Except for the way his eyes held contact a beat longer than necessary. Except for the small smile that followed, different from his usual broad grin. Something quieter, more personal. "No problem," Avery had managed to say, heart racing inexplicably. "You're always drawing," Cameron observed, nodding toward the sketchbook. "What do you see when you look at people?" The question was unexpected, thoughtful in a way that caught Avery off guard. "Stories, I guess. Everyone's carrying something invisible." Cameron's expression had shifted then, something flickering behind his eyes. What's my story then? What am I carrying? Before Avery could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much observation, the warning bell rang, and Cameron was swept away by a group of teammates. But he'd glanced back, just once, with an expression Avery couldn't decipher, but spent the next 3 classes trying to capture in pencil. After that, it seemed like Cameron was everywhere. Passing in the hallway became a regular occurrence, despite having different schedules. He'd appear in the library when Avery was working on art projects. Once, he even showed up at the coffee shop downtown where Avery worked weekend shifts, ordering a complicated latte and leaving a generous tip along with another one of those private smiles. Each interaction left Avery increasingly confused. The logical explanation was that Cameron was just being friendly. He was nice to everyone, after all. But there was something in the way he leaned slightly closer when they spoke, how his eyes would drift to Avery's hands while they were talking, the way he seemed to create moments of privacy, even in crowded spaces. It felt deliberate, this dance of approach and retreat. Inside, Avery was a mess of contradictions. The thrill of Cameron's attention warred with the fear of misinterpreting signals. The hope that someone like him could be interested collided with the terror of what that might mean in a school where differences were tolerated but rarely celebrated. Every night brought dreams that left Avery breathless, and every morning brought anxiety about facing Cameron again, wanting it desperately and dreading it simultaneously. Their classmates began to notice the attention. Whispers followed Avery down hallways. Some were curious, others less kind. Madison Porter, who dated Cameron briefly sophomore year, made a point of bumping into Avery's desk during chemistry, sending carefully organized notes scattering. "He's just being nice because he feels sorry for you," she'd whispered. "Don't get confused." The words stung because they echoed Avery's own doubts. Why would someone like Cameron Reed, with his bright future and easy path, risk complication? It made no sense. And yet, the way he looked sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, there was longing there and recognition of something shared. 3 weeks after the water fountain incident, Avery was hurrying through the east hallway during lunch period, late for a meeting with Ms. Winters about a portfolio submission. The corridor was nearly empty, most students in the cafeteria or outside enjoying the spring weather. Footsteps echoed behind, moving quickly, and then Cameron was there, falling into step. "You're always rushing somewhere," he said, slightly out of breath. "Hard to catch you alone." Avery slowed, pulse immediately accelerating. "Art meeting. Ms. Winters is helping with college applications." "You're really talented," Cameron said, and the sincerity in his voice made Avery look up and meet his eyes directly. "I saw your piece in the district show, the one with all the hands reaching for each other, but never quite touching." The fact that he'd not only seen the piece, but understood it sent warmth spreading through Avery's chest. "You went to the district show?" Cameron shrugged, suddenly looking less confident. "I go to a lot of things people don't expect me to." He paused, glancing around the empty hallway. "That's the thing about expectations, right? They trap you in this box of who people think you are, not who you might want to be." The words resonated so deeply that Avery stopped walking entirely. Cameron stopped too, turning to face each other in the quiet corridor, sunlight streaming through windows creating patterns on the linoleum floor. Something shifted in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of similar struggles wrapped in different packaging. "I know what that's like," Avery admitted softly. "Being seen, but not really seen." Cameron stepped closer, close enough that Avery could smell his cologne, something with hints of cedar and citrus. "I see you," he said, voice dropping lower. "I've been trying to tell you that for months." Before Avery could process those words, Cameron moved even closer. His hand, warm and slightly calloused from basketball, slid gently under the hem of Avery's shirt, resting against the small of the back. The touch was electric, sending shivers across skin that had rarely known another's contact. Cameron leaned in, his breath warm against Avery's ear. "Closer," he whispered, the single word containing questions and answers all at once. Time seemed to suspend in that moment. The empty hallway, the warmth of his palm against bare skin, the impossible closeness of his body. Avery could feel Cameron's heartbeat, racing as fast as his own. There was fear there, certainly. Fear of discovery, fear of rejection, fear of what this meant. but beneath it ran a current of exhilaration so powerful it nearly overwhelmed everything else. Avery's hand moved without conscious decision, reaching up to touch Cameron's face. His cheek was smooth, recently shaved, and he leaned into the touch like someone starving for contact. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling in the space between them. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet, but it was an acknowledgement, a promise, a crossing of a line that neither could uncross. The distant sound of a door opening broke the spell. They stepped apart quickly, though Cameron's hand lingered for a moment longer against Avery's skin before reluctantly withdrawing. His eyes held promises of conversations yet to be had, feelings yet to be fully expressed. "Find me later," he said softly, before turning and walking away, leaving Avery breathless and transformed in the empty hallway. The meeting with Ms. Winters passed in a blur. Avery nodded and responded automatically, but inside was a hurricane of emotions. The feeling of Cameron's hand still burned against skin, his whispered "closer" echoing on repeat. What did it mean? What would happen next? The questions tumbled endlessly, making concentration impossible. That night, sleep was elusive. Avery replayed the hallway scene countless times, analyzing every second, every touch, every word. There was no denying the intention behind Cameron's actions. This wasn't friendliness or misinterpreted signals. But the reality of what they were potentially starting carried complications neither could ignore. Cameron had college scouts watching him, a basketball scholarship likely in his future. Avery had dreams of art school, of escaping to a city where diversity wasn't just tolerated but celebrated. Their paths were diverging just as they'd found each other. The next day at school, anticipation made Avery jumpy and distracted. Every time the classroom door opened, every glimpse of someone tall with dark hair in the hallway sent adrenaline coursing. But Cameron wasn't in their shared literature class, his seat conspicuously empty. By lunch, rumors were circulating that he'd gone home sick, or was at a basketball tournament in the next county. Stories varied, but his absence felt deliberate, a retreat from what had happened. Disappointment settled heavy in Avery's stomach, along with the creeping doubt that perhaps Madison had been right. Maybe Cameron had realized he'd made a mistake, crossed a line he hadn't meant to cross. The thought was painful enough that Avery skipped afternoon classes, hiding in the art room with Ms. Winters' permission, losing himself in charcoal and paper, trying to exorcise feelings through creation. It was nearly 5 when Avery finally left school, the hallways quiet and empty. Outside, the parking lot was mostly vacant, just a few cars belonging to teachers and students in after-school activities. The spring air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the courtyard. Avery was halfway to the bike rack when a familiar voice called out, "I've been waiting for you." Cameron was leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, looking simultaneously confident and vulnerable. He pushed off the vehicle and walked over, stopping a respectable distance away, close enough for conversation, far enough for propriety if anyone was watching. "You weren't in class," Avery said, unable to keep the accusation from coloring the words. Cameron ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Avery had noticed he made when nervous. "I know. I'm sorry. I needed to think, and I couldn't do that seeing you across the room, pretending nothing happened." The honesty was disarming. "And what did you think about?" "Everything. My parents, my friends, college, the future." He took a deep breath. "You. Mostly you, actually." Avery waited, heart suspended between hope and fear. "I've never felt this way before," Cameron continued, words coming faster now. "Not about anyone. And it scares me because it's not what I planned, not what everyone expects from me. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe. Like I'm not just playing a part everyone wrote for me." The words resonated deeply, echoing Avery's own feelings. "I know what you mean. But this, us, it would complicate everything." "Everything's already complicated," Cameron said, stepping closer. "We just pretend it isn't. I'm tired of pretending." He reached out slowly, giving Avery time to move away if desired. When there was no retreat, he took Avery's hand, intertwining their fingers in plain view. It was a small gesture but carried enormous weight, an acknowledgement, a declaration, a risk. "I want to know you," Cameron said softly. "The real you, not just what I see in the hallways or what you show in your art. And I want you to know me, Not the basketball player or the guy everyone thinks they know. Just me. The sincerity in his voice broke something open inside Avery, a dam of caution and fear giving way to possibility. I'd like that too. That evening marked the beginning of something neither had experienced before. They drove to the lake outside town, sitting on the hood of Cameron's car as the sun set, talking for hours. Cameron spoke about the pressure he felt, from his father who saw basketball as his ticket to success, from coaches who treated him like an investment rather than a person, from friends who only knew one version of him. Avery shared stories of isolation, a feeling invisible except when art allowed expression, of parents who loved deeply but couldn't understand their child's reluctance to conform. As darkness fell and stars appeared above the water, Cameron hesitantly reached for Avery's hand again. "I've never been with a guy before," he admitted quietly. "I've thought about it, but—" "Me neither," Avery said. "With anyone. I've never really connected enough to want to." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Cameron turned, moonlight silvering his features. "Can I kiss you? I've been thinking about it since yesterday in the hallway. Actually, longer than that." Avery nodded, unable to form words. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question being asked and answered simultaneously. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, the tension that had built for months finally finding release in this moment of connection. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance of discovery and discretion. They created their own world in private moments, study sessions that involved more talking than studying, drives to neighboring towns where they could walk holding hands without recognition, late-night phone calls that lasted until dawn. Each day revealed new facets of each other. Cameron's unexpected love of poetry and classic films, Avery's secret talent for baking and dry sense of humor that few had been privileged to witness. At school, they maintained a careful distance, though their growing friendship was noted. Cameron would sit with Avery at lunch occasionally, bringing along teammates who were initially awkward but gradually accepted the quiet artist into their boisterous conversations. Avery attended basketball games, discovering an unexpected enjoyment in watching Cameron in his element, powerful and graceful on the court. But rumors began to circulate nonetheless. High schools run on gossip, and the sudden friendship between the basketball star and the artistic loner raised questions. Notes appeared in Avery's locker, some supportive from those who suspected the truth, others cruelly mocking. Cameron faced whispers in the locker room, comments disguised as jokes that carried barbs of prejudice. The pressure reached a breaking point one afternoon when Avery found Cameron sitting alone in the bleachers after practice, staring at his phone with a stricken expression. "What's wrong?" Avery asked, sitting beside him but careful to maintain public distance. Cameron wordlessly handed over his phone. On the screen was a text from his father. "Coach Wilson called. Said you've been distracted lately, hanging with some art kid. This better not affect your game. Scouts are watching every move." The message wasn't explicitly homophobic, but the implication was clear. Cameron's priorities were being questioned, and Avery was viewed as a distraction from his predetermined path. "Maybe we should cool things for a while," Cameron said, voice hollow. "Just until the season ends and scholarships are settled." The words hit like physical blows. Avery stood, hurt, transforming instantly to anger. "Cool things? Is that what we're doing? Just something that can be heated up or cooled down depending on what's convenient for you." "That's not what I meant," Cameron protested, reaching for Avery's hand, then dropping his own when a group of students walked past. That instinctive withdrawal said everything. "I think it's exactly what you meant," Avery said quietly. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, Cameron. I won't go back to that, not even for you." Walking away was the hardest thing Avery had ever done, each step feeling like moving through concrete. Behind, Cameron called out once, but made no move to follow. The next week was agony. They avoided each other in hallways, sat at opposite ends of classrooms. Avery threw himself into art, creating dark, fragmented pieces that concerned Ms. Winters enough that she asked if everything was all right. Cameron played basketball with a reckless intensity that won games, but worried his coach, who noted his disregard for personal safety on the court. Friends on both sides noticed the change. Avery's few close acquaintances in the art department watched with concern as sketchbooks filled with variations of the same face, always unfinished, always looking away. Cameron's teammates commented on his sudden mood swings, his lack of the easy charm that had defined him. 10 days after their fight, Avery was working late in the art room, finishing a portfolio piece for a college application. The school was mostly empty, just a few teachers and the basketball team practicing in the gym. The piece wasn't coming together. Nothing had, lately, and frustration had Avery ready to abandon it entirely when the door opened. Cameron stood there in his practice clothes, hair damp with sweat, looking exhausted and determined. "I told Coach I needed a break," he said without preamble. He wasn't happy. Avery turned back to the canvas. "What do you want, Cameron?" "You." The simplicity of his answer made Avery look up. "Just you. And I'm sorry it took me losing you to realize that nothing else matters as much." He walked further into the room, looking at the painting Avery was working on, a figure trapped between two worlds, reaching toward light, but held back by shadowy hands. "Is that how you feel? Trapped?" "Sometimes," Avery admitted. "Aren't you?" "I was," Cameron said. "Until I met you. Then I started feeling free for the first time. And when I tried to go back to the way things were before, I couldn't breathe again." He moved closer, no longer concerned about who might see. "I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want you to be invisible. I want everyone to know that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." The words were everything Avery had wanted to hear, but fear still lingered. "What about your scholarship? Your dad? The team?" "I'll figure it out," Cameron said with newfound resolve. "My dad loves me. He'll come around eventually. As for basketball, if a school doesn't want me because of who I love, then I don't want them either." Love. The word hung between them, spoken for the first time. Avery stood, closing the distance between them. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back to being invisible." Cameron reached out, finally unconcerned about who might walk in, and pulled Avery close. "I've never been more sure of anything," he whispered, before kissing Avery with a certainty that erased all doubts. The following day, they walked into school together, hands intertwined. The reaction was immediate: whispers, stares, a few catcalls, some supportive smiles. Madison Porter rolled her eyes dramatically. Cameron's teammates looked shocked, then thoughtful. Ms. Winters gave Avery a thumbs up from her classroom door. It wasn't easy. Cameron's father refused to speak to him for 2 weeks, though his mother became an unexpected ally. Some college scouts did indeed cool their interest, though others made a point of saying his personal life was irrelevant to his athletic abilities. Avery faced increased attention, not all of it welcome, but found strength in no longer hiding. But there were beautiful moments too. The spring dance, where they slow danced under dimmed lights, Cameron's palm once again sliding under Avery's shirt, this time in full view of their classmates. The art show where Cameron proudly stood beside Avery's displayed work, explaining the techniques to his confused but supportive teammates. The day Cameron's father finally showed up at a game again, awkwardly asking if Avery would join them for dinner afterward. By graduation, they were no longer the main topic of gossip, high school attention spans being mercifully short. Cameron had accepted a scholarship to a university with a strong arts program where Avery had also been accepted. They were planning to get an apartment together, a small place, but theirs. On the last day of school, they found themselves in that same hallway where everything had changed. The corridor was empty, everyone else already gone to begin their summer. Sunlight streamed through windows, creating the same patterns on the floor that had been there months ago. "Do you remember?" Cameron asked, stopping at the exact spot. Avery smiled. "How could I forget? You terrified me." "I terrified myself," Cameron admitted. He stepped closer, recreating that moment. His hand slid under Avery's shirt, warm against the small of his back. But it was the best kind of terrifying. Like jumping off a cliff and finding out you can fly. Avery agreed, leaning into his touch. Cameron smiled, that private smile that was now Avery's favorite sight in the world. He leaned in, lips brushing Avery's ear just as they had that first time. "Closer," he whispered again, the word now carrying history and promise and a future neither had dared imagine before that day in the hallway when everything changed. As they walked out of the school for the last time, hands intertwined, Avery thought about all the invisible things people carry, fears and hopes and parts of themselves they hide away. Sometimes it takes one person seeing you, really seeing you, to make those invisible things visible. And sometimes, a single moment of courage in a high school hallway can change the course of 2 lives forever. Total underscore char underscore count. 18,902.